All right, so the repercussions of that tailings dam collapse in Jagersfontein, of course, are still being assessed. And Gwede Mantashe is saying that a full report has to be conducted. And the owners of that dam, which is a Jagersfontein development, saying today that if they are found to have erred, they will take responsibility. Let's just take a closer look at this issue now with water governance expert Carin Bosman. Carin, thank you so much for joining us. I want to play you a clip from someone who's speaking for Jagersfontein Development. And let me just give you the context. Earlier in the program, we heard from a member of the community, and they said, we have been complaining and worried about this dam since at least 2014, and we were ignored. Now, our reporter, Mangoba Mkunu, put that very question to Jagersfontein Development, and this is what they had to say.
Plant has got to take liability.
But Mr. Morris, I mean, how did we get here? Because community members are saying that there were warning signs, they were raising these issues to you, but nothing was done.
Look, community members, with respect, are not engineers. We had our engineering reports done, and all that was done and put in place, and everything was done according to that. So I can show you pictures 4 days before the time of that specific wall that broke. You won't be able to recognize. So how they did, I'm not sure.
There are someone saying that this might be gross negligence on the part of the mine. What do you say to that?
Well, if that is so, then obviously we'll have to wait for the investigation to be completed and for the necessary steps to be taken. Then if that is so, we must handle it, you know, and the government will obviously, and the departments will act according to that.
All right, so that's a spokesperson for Jagersfontein Development. Carin, I want to bring you in here because he seemed to be dismissing the concerns raised by members of the community. And he said, fair enough, he said community members are not engineers. So I want to ask you, in terms of the history of this tailings dam, do we have anything on record in terms of reports detailing concern about the safety of this dam?
Well, Kathy, yes. I mean, the Department of Water Affairs and Forestry has issued a directive to the mine in 2020 that said that the amount of water you place onto this tailings dam is a concern for us, and that you need to do something about this and actually stop operations. Now, it seems to me, from what I've heard, that the person from the mine is trying to say, oh no, act of God, 5 days before there was no problem. But that's not how these things work. And you don't need to be an engineer to understand the basics of, if you put too much water within a containment facility, that containment facility will fail. It's like if I have a tree and I put a little berm around the tree and fill it with water to fill the tree, if I put too much water in that facility, that berm around the tree the wall will break. And so to say that the community members are not engineers actually carries no weight. And the question that I'm raised immediately in my mind is, if the mine is saying that they had reports saying that there's not a problem, did they have those reports peer-reviewed? Because peer review is one of the basic principles of any scientific engineering investigation inquiry. If a peer-reviewed report said, and the peer reviewers agreed with the assessment in the peer-reviewed report, said that this tailings dam is not a problem, then by all means there should be a further investigation. However, there's no walking away here from liability. Irrespective of the arguments about jurisdiction of which government department should have been doing oversight, that is irrelevant, because the National Water Act is very specific and very clear. Section 19 says, a person who owns land, controls land, uses land, or occupies land on which anything is or was done or any situation exists that cause pollution must take all reasonable steps to prevent the pollution from occurring, recurring, or continuing, irrespective of what any, if you now have a report that tells you, listen, this dam is not going to overtop, but the report was based on incorrect assumptions, then you have no defense. You cannot argue your way out of that.
All right,
and
so the
in
laws...
The definition,
yeah, sorry to jump in. Yeah, the law is very clear. You've also made the point that if their engineer reports said everything was fine just 4 days before, were those reports peer-reviewed? I just want to pick up on something you said. You said in 2020, it was the Department of Water Affairs and Forestry looked at that dam and said there's too much water in this dam. Do you know if any action was taken by the owners after that report?
I don't. I have no idea if they've taken any action to reduce the volume of water placed on the dam. I only have documentation available up to the beginning of 2021. And I don't know also if Water Affairs has taken any action, any further action. But one has to understand that it's often quite difficult for an official to take a next step when a company does not comply, because the next step would then be to engage with the National Prosecution Agency or and then take the next step on prosecuting a facility, and that takes some high-level involvement. And this is where I refer to things that I refer to as the politics of pollution. If a high-level intervention would now mean that some politician's friend is engaged or involved, then the action will not necessarily be taken in spite of the good efforts of the officials. The fact that the officials deemed it necessary to issue this directive is for me a big red flag and tells me that Water Affairs saw there's too much water.
So we are going to be speaking to Water Affairs. Sorry to jump in. I've got so many questions for you, Carin. I'm very pleased that you're speaking to us this evening. We are going to ask them because we are actually speaking to the Deputy Water Minister a little later in this program. I want to talk to you about some of your tweets. You talk about the fact that this dam wall collapse actually completely messed up the sewage works in the Charlesville, Jagersfontein area. And we now have a situation of sewage plus this mine sludge flowing into the waterways in the area. I wonder if you could update us on that impact, because there's real concern that it could spread far and wide, particularly if the rains come.
Absolutely correct, Kathy. So what I've noted when I did a comparison on Google Earth on the spread from aerial photographs of this contamination, and then I noted that the sewage works is located right in the flood path and had to have been taken away together with the houses. Now, that means that what currently flows further down is not just the tailings, but it's also raw sewage. And we need immediate intervention to stop both the tailings and the raw sewage from entering the Jagersfontein Dam, which is a mere 5 to 10 kilometers further downstream. Now, this is an imminent danger because the Jagersfontein Dam is the water supply source for Forest and Jagersfontein and maybe other towns as well. And maybe you guys can speak to Bloem Water because they operate the pump station there at the Jagersfontein Dam. Now, normally the sewage treatment works, the water treatment works will be designed to deal with river water, not with tailings. And so the corrosive nature, I mean, it's a fine silt that when it gets dry, it solidifies into almost cement. But when it gets wet, it becomes fluid again. And that will flow into the pump station. And that will damage not only the pump station, so that's a corrosive effect, will damage the pump station, but also the quality will include raw sewage, which will then put an additional burden on the water purification works, which is not designed to treat raw sewage, it's designed to treat river water. And so you have two imminent threats to community water supply in at least 2 more towns. So what needs to happen right away is temporary toilets for everybody in Jagersfontein, because that's the sewage works for the whole town, as well as a temporary sewage treatment plant and berms with trenches to prevent this flow from reaching the Jagersfontein Dam, and then an immediate starting to clean up from the river backwards, so that the rains that come, and we know the rain's going to come, we're in the beginning of the rainy season, the rain's going to come tomorrow or Saturday, that will take this slimes and tailings and raw sewage even further into the Jagersfontein Dam. So it's quite pressing that we take very urgent action to stop the flow of the sewage and the contaminated water any further into the river.
You're painting such a worrying picture. I mean, it's so worrying, and you never mind the livestock and anyone who needs that water. We're certainly going to raise these issues with the Department of Water when we speak to them. Thank you so much. I mean, it's such important information, and it really is going to be a race against time. Thank you so much for your time. That is water governance expert Carin Bosman.